Marcus Chun had been staring at the assignment orders for 3 hours, reading the same lines over and over again. The words hadn't changed, but the reality of what he was being asked to do kept sinking deeper into his consciousness like a stone through thick mud. Maintenance Engineer, Level 7 clearance required. Destination, Kepler Station, Outer Rim. Duration, indefinite. Warning, previous repair teams have been unsuccessful. The last line bothered him the most. In his 15 years working for the Galactic Engineering Corps, he had never seen that particular warning attached to a routine maintenance job. But then, again, nothing about Kepler Station was routine. The station sat at the edge of known space, built by an extinct alien race called the Architects. Nobody knew what had happened to them. One day they were there, building impossible structures that defied human understanding of physics and engineering. The next day, they were gone, leaving behind only their creations and a galaxy full of questions. Marcus pushed back from his desk and walked to the small window of his quarters aboard the transport ship Endurance. Outside, the stars looked the same as they always did, distant, cold, and indifferent. But somewhere out there, past the rim of human exploration, Kepler Station waited for him. The station had been discovered 5 years ago by a survey team looking for new mining opportunities. What they found instead was a structure so massive and complex that it had taken 3 years just to map its exterior. The thing was bigger than most cities, shaped like an enormous crystal that seemed to grow out of the asteroid it was attached to. The discovery had sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Here was proof that humanity wasn't alone in the universe, and that whoever had built this place possessed technology far beyond anything humans had achieved. The station became the focus of intense study, with teams of scientists, engineers, and explorers making the long journey to unlock its secrets. That's when the problems started. The first team reported that while they could enter the station without difficulty, many of its systems seemed to be failing. Lights flickered randomly, doors opened and closed on their own, and strange sounds echoed through the corridors. They requested a maintenance team to help stabilize the station's infrastructure before continuing their research. The maintenance team arrived 6 months later. They were experienced professionals, the best the Corps had to offer. They had worked on everything from deep space mining platforms to orbital cities. Kepler Station should have been just another job for them. 3 weeks into their assignment, they sent a message saying they had made significant progress but needed more time. That was the last anyone heard from them. A search and rescue team found the station exactly as the maintenance crew had left it. Their tools were still laid out, their personal belongings untouched in their quarters. But the crew themselves had vanished without a trace. There were no signs of violence, no indication of what had happened to them. They had simply disappeared. The second maintenance team was larger and better equipped. They brought military escorts and established regular check-ins with command. They lasted 2 months before the same thing happened. One day, they reported everything was normal. The next day, they were gone. After the third team disappeared, the Galactic Engineering Corps declared Kepler Station off-limits to all personnel. The scientists protested, arguing that the station represented the greatest archaeological discovery in human history, but the Corps held firm. Too many people have been lost already. That decision had stood for 2 years, until 3 weeks ago. Marcus didn't know what had changed the Corps' mind, but something had convinced them to send another team. Not a team, actually, just him. One man, alone, with orders to assess the station's condition and determine if it could be safely repaired. He had volunteered for the assignment, though he wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe it was curiosity about the lost teams. Maybe it was the challenge of working on alien technology. Or maybe it was just the fact that he had nothing left to lose. His wife, Sarah, had died in a transport accident 8 months ago. They had been married for 12 years, and her death had left a hole in his life that nothing seemed capable of filling. Work helped distract him from the pain, but even that was becoming harder. When the opportunity to volunteer for the Kepler Station assignment came up, it felt like exactly what he needed, a chance to lose himself in a project so complex and demanding that there wouldn't be room for grief. The transport ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace, and Marcus felt his stomach lurch. They had arrived. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. "Attention passenger, we have arrived at the Kepler system. Approach to the station will begin in 30 minutes. Please prepare for departure." Marcus gathered his equipment and made his way to the cargo bay where his personal shuttle was waiting. The Endurance couldn't dock with Kepler Station directly. The station's docking systems were designed for alien ships, and nobody had figured out how to make them work with human vessels. Instead, he would take his shuttle across the gap and use one of the station's maintenance airlocks. As the cargo bay doors opened, Marcus got his first look at Kepler Station, and his breath caught in his throat. The structure was even more impressive than the images he had studied. It rose from the surface of the asteroid like a massive crystal formation, its surfaces reflecting the light of the system's distant star in patterns that seemed almost alive. The station was clearly artificial, but it had an organic quality that made it feel grown rather than built. Sections of the station were dark, while others pulsed with faint light that traveled along lines and curves carved into the crystal surfaces. As he watched, patterns of illumination would appear and disappear as if the station were breathing or thinking. Marcus climbed into his shuttle and began the pre-flight sequence. The little ship was equipped with everything he would need for an extended stay on the station: food, water, oxygen, and enough spare parts and tools to handle most maintenance situations. If he ran into something beyond his capabilities, he could call for support, though getting help would take weeks given the station's remote location. The shuttle detached from the Endurance and began the short journey to Kepler Station. As he got closer, Marcus could see more details of the alien construction. The crystal surfaces weren't smooth as they had appeared from a distance. Instead, they were covered with intricate patterns, geometric shapes, flowing lines, and symbols that might have been writing in an alien language. Some sections of the station showed obvious signs of damage or malfunction. Dark areas where lights should have been active, surfaces that looked cracked or corrupted, and what appeared to be entire sections that had gone completely dead. Whatever was wrong with the station, it was getting worse. Marcus found the maintenance airlock exactly where the previous teams had reported it. The alien designers had apparently anticipated the need for external access, because the airlock was clearly designed to accommodate beings that weren't necessarily the same size and shape as the architects. It was large enough for his shuttle to dock directly with it. The docking procedure was surprisingly smooth. The station's systems seemed to recognize his shuttle and automatically adjusted the airlock to create a proper seal. Within minutes, he was safely connected to Kepler Station. Before leaving his shuttle, Marcus activated his recording equipment and opened a communication channel to the Endurance. "This is Engineer Chun beginning initial assessment of Kepler Station. Time is 1400 hours, station time. I am preparing to enter the station through Maintenance Airlock 7. Copy that, Engineer Chun," came the reply from Captain Rodriguez. "We'll maintain position for another 6 hours in case you need immediate extraction. After that, we'll proceed to the relay station to await your next scheduled communication." "Understood." Chin out. Marcus sealed his environmental suit and opened the airlock. Beyond it lay a corridor that stretched away into the depths of the alien station. The walls were made of the same crystal material as the exterior, but here they were clearly designed for interior use. Panels of softer light provided illumination, and the floor had a texture that would provide good traction for various types of feet. The corridor was larger than necessary for humans, clearly designed for beings that were taller and possibly broader than people. But it wasn't so large as to be uncomfortable. The alien architect had apparently understood the importance of scale in creating spaces that felt right to their inhabitants. Marcus took his first steps into Kepler Station and immediately noticed something the previous teams had reported. The air was breathable. Analysis had shown it was actually cleaner and fresher than the recycled atmosphere of most human spacecraft. The The station was maintaining its life support systems perfectly, which made the other malfunctions even more mysterious. As he walked down the corridor, Marcus noted the condition of the systems around him. Most appeared to be functioning normally. The lights were steady, the air circulation was working, and the gravity felt stable at about 90% of Earth normal. Whatever was causing the station's problems wasn't affecting this section. The corridor branched in several directions, and Marcus consulted the maps created by the previous teams. According to their reports, the station was organized around a central hub with corridors radiating outward like spokes of a wheel. The hub contained what appeared to be the station's primary control systems, though nobody had been able to figure out how to access them. Marcus decided to head for the central hub first. If he was to understand what was wrong with the station, that seemed like the logical place to start. As he walked deeper into the station, he began to notice subtle changes in the environment around him. The lighting became more varied, with some panels showing different colors and patterns. The walls began to display symbols and designs that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. Most unsettling of all, he began to hear sounds. At first, he thought it might be the station's mechanical systems, pumps, fans, or other equipment that would be expected in any large structure. But the sounds weren't mechanical. They were more like whispers or conversations happening just at the edge of his hearing. When he stopped to listen more carefully, the sounds would fade away, only to return when he started walking again. Marcus checked his suit's sensors, but they showed nothing unusual. The sounds weren't coming through the station's atmosphere. They were somehow being transmitted directly to his ears, possibly through the suit's communication system. But that should have been impossible. His comm system was encrypted and shielded against outside interference. After 20 minutes of walking, Marcus reached the central hub and stopped short. The space was enormous, rising hundreds of feet above his head and extending far beyond what his lights could illuminate. The walls were covered with panels, displays, and controls that stretched up into the darkness. Some of them were active, showing patterns of light that moved and flowed like liquid. Others were dark and apparently non-functional. In the center of the hub stood a structure that looked like a control console, though it was clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. The console was surrounded by a raised platform that could be reached by a ramp that spiraled up from the floor. Marcus approached the platform carefully. This was where the previous teams had focused most of their efforts, trying to understand how the station systems worked. According to their reports, they had made some progress in identifying different types of controls, but had never been able to activate any of them. As he climbed the ramp, Marcus noticed that some of the panels around him were beginning to respond to his presence. Displays that had been dark started to show faint patterns of light. Symbols appeared and disappeared on various screens. It was as if the station was waking up. When he reached the control console, Marcus was surprised to see that it looked different than in the images taken by the previous teams. New displays had appeared, showing diagrams and symbols that seemed almost familiar, though he couldn't place where he might have seen them before. One display showed what appeared to be a schematic of the station itself. Different sections were highlighted in various colors, and Marcus could see that large portions of the structure were showing red indicators that probably meant some kind of malfunction or failure. As he studied the display, something remarkable happened. The symbols on the screen began to change, shifting from the alien script to something that looked more like mathematical equations and engineering diagrams. It was as if the station was trying to communicate with him in a language he could understand. Marcus pulled out his tablet and began taking detailed photos and notes. This was definitely something new. None of the previous teams had reported anything like this level of interaction with the station systems. He spent the next several hours exploring the control console and the surrounding displays, documenting everything he found. The station seemed to be trying to show him what was wrong with it, displaying diagnostic information and error reports in increasingly familiar formats. Gradually, a picture began to emerge. The station wasn't just malfunctioning, it was dying. Some kind of cascade failure was spreading through its systems, shutting down sections one by one. The process had been going on for years, possibly decades, but had accelerated recently. More troubling was what the station seemed to be telling him about the previous repair teams. According to the diagnostic displays, the station had detected their presence and had tried to communicate with them just as it was doing with Marcus. But something had gone wrong during those interactions. The display showed what looked like error messages, warnings about incompatible interface protocols, and neural pathway overload. Marcus wasn't sure what that meant, but it didn't sound good. As the hours passed, Marcus became increasingly absorbed in his work. The station's systems were unlike anything he had ever seen, but they operated on principles he could recognize and understand. It was like studying a car engine designed by someone from a completely different world. The details were alien, but the basic concepts were universal. He was so focused on his analysis that he almost didn't notice when the whispers started getting louder. At first, it was just an increase in the background noise he had been hearing since entering the station. But gradually, the sounds became more distinct. They weren't whispers anymore. They were voices speaking in a language he didn't recognize but somehow understood. The voices were trying to tell him something. They seemed urgent, almost desperate, as if they were running out of time. Marcus couldn't make out specific words, but the emotional content was clear: fear, loneliness, and a desperate need for help. He looked around the control room, but it was empty except for himself. The voices weren't coming from anywhere he could see. They seemed to be coming from the station itself. Marcus checked his chronometer and was shocked to see that he had been working for nearly 10 hours. It felt like minutes. He needed to eat something and get some rest, but he was reluctant to leave the control room. He felt like he was on the verge of a breakthrough. As if responding to his thoughts, one of the displays showed a diagram of what appeared to be crew quarters. A path was highlighted, leading from the central hub to a section of the station that the previous teams had identified as living areas. The station was showing him where he could rest. Marcus gathered his equipment and followed the indicated route. The corridors he passed through were well lit and apparently fully functional. Whatever was causing the station's problems hadn't reached this area yet. The crew quarters were clearly designed for the architects, but they were adaptable enough that he could use them. The rooms were larger than necessary for humans, but they contained recognizable furniture, beds, desks, storage areas. The beds were too big, but he could make them work. More importantly, the environmental systems in this section seemed to be working perfectly. The air was fresh, the temperature was comfortable, and there was even running water. Marcus was able to remove his environmental suit for the first time since boarding the station. As he prepared to sleep, Marcus reviewed the data he had collected during his first day. The station was definitely trying to communicate with him, and it seemed to be succeeding better than it had with the previous teams. The question was why? What made him different? He was a good engineer, but so were the people who had come before him. He had experience with alien technology, but not more than his predecessors. As far as he could tell, there was nothing special about him that would explain the station's response, unless it had something to do with his state of mind. Marcus had come to Kepler Station with nothing to lose. His wife was dead, his old life was over, and he had no real expectations of returning home. Maybe that made him more open to the station's attempts at communication. Maybe the previous teams had been too focused on getting home safely to fully engage with what they were experiencing. Or maybe the station was getting more desperate as its condition deteriorated, and was willing to take greater risks to find someone who could help it. As Marcus drifted off to sleep, the voices in the station grew quieter, but didn't disappear entirely. They seemed to be watching over him, like concerned friends keeping vigil through the night. In his dreams, he found himself walking through corridors that were different from the ones he had explored during the day. These passages were filled with light and activity. Tall, graceful beings moved through them with purpose and dignity. They looked like the idealized versions of humans, taller, more elegant, with features that suggested both great intelligence and deep compassion. The beings in his dream seemed to notice him, and some of them approached him with expressions of curiosity and hope. They spoke to him, and though he couldn't understand their words, their meaning was clear. They were asking for his help. When Marcus woke the next morning, he felt more rested than he had in months. The station's environmental systems had apparently analyzed his needs during the night and adjusted the atmosphere, temperature, and even the lighting to help him sleep more effectively. As he prepared for his second day of exploration, Marcus found himself thinking about his dream. The beings he had seen felt familiar somehow, as if he had met them before. But that was impossible. The architects had been gone for who knew how long, and no human had ever seen a living member of their species. Still, the dream had felt real in a way that ordinary dreams didn't. It was as if the station had been showing him something important, giving him a glimpse of what this place had been like when it was alive with its creators. Marcus made his way back to the central control room and immediately noticed that something had changed. New displays were active, showing information that hadn't been there the day before. It was as if the station had spent the night preparing new ways to communicate with him. One display showed what appeared to be a timeline, a series of images and symbols that seemed to tell the story of the station's construction and operation. Marcus could see the architects building the station, installing its systems, and using it for some purpose that wasn't immediately clear. The timeline showed the station operating normally for what appeared to be a long period of time. Then, something changed. The images became darker, showing systems beginning to fail and sections of the station going offline. The architects themselves seemed to disappear from the timeline at this point. But the station hadn't died with its creators. Instead, it had continued operating on its own, maintaining itself as best it could while waiting for someone to return and repair the damage that was slowly spreading through its systems. Marcus realized that he was looking at a cry for help that had been echoing across space for possibly centuries. The station was a masterpiece of engineering that had been abandoned by its creators and left to die alone in the darkness. The thought filled him with a determination he hadn't felt since Sarah's death. This magnificent structure deserved better than a slow, lonely death. If there was a way to save it, he was going to find it. Over the following days, Marcus threw himself into understanding the station's systems with an intensity that surprised even him. The station seemed to respond to his dedication, revealing more of its secrets with each passing hour. The communication between them became smoother and more natural, as if they were learning each other's languages. He discovered that the station was far more than just a research outpost or mining facility. It was actually a kind of archive, a repository of the architects' knowledge and culture designed to preserve their civilization even if they themselves were destroyed. The failing systems weren't just threatening the station's operation. They were threatening the loss of an entire species' legacy. Every day that passed, more information was corrupted or lost forever. Marcus began to understand what had happened to the previous repair teams. The station had tried to communicate with them, but the process had been too much for human minds to handle. The neural interfaces that the architects had used naturally were overwhelming to humans, causing some kind of mental breakdown or dissociation. But Marcus seemed to be different. Maybe it was his emotional state, or maybe it was something else, but he was able to handle the station's communication attempts without suffering the same fate as his predecessors. As his understanding of the station grew, Marcus began to realize that repairing it was going to require more than just fixing broken equipment. The station was a living system, in a sense. Its various components were interconnected in ways that went beyond simple mechanical or electrical connections. To save the station, he would need to become part of it. The realization didn't frighten him as much as it probably should have. His old life was gone anyway, and the thought of becoming part of something greater than himself was actually appealing. He would be preserving the legacy of an entire civilization while gaining access to knowledge that could advance human understanding by centuries. But first, he had to figure out how to actually perform the integration without destroying either himself or the station in the process. As Marcus prepared for what might be the most important decision of his life, he couldn't shake the feeling that events were moving towards some kind of inevitable conclusion. The station needed him, and he needed the station. Everything that had happened, Sarah's death, his assignment to this mission, his unique ability to communicate with the alien systems, had been leading to this moment. He just hoped he was strong enough to see it through. Marcus stood before the main control interface, his hands trembling slightly as he reached toward what appeared to be a neural connection port. The station had been showing him this interface for 3 days, repeatedly highlighting it in displays and diagrams. The message was clear. This was how he could help. The port looked organic, almost like a flower made of crystalline material that would open when touched. According to the information the station had provided, it was designed to create a direct neural link between a living consciousness and the station's central intelligence. The architects had used similar interfaces routinely, but no human had ever attempted such a connection. Marcus had spent hours studying the technical specifications the station had shown him. The process appeared relatively safe. The interface was designed with multiple safeguards to prevent damage to the connecting consciousness. But relatively safe for an architect might mean something entirely different for a human. The previous repair teams had apparently triggered automatic connection attempts when they had gotten too close to the main interface. Their human brains hadn't been prepared for the experience, and the shock had either killed them or driven them insane. The station had learned from those failures and was now offering Marcus a much gentler approach. But even a gentle neural interface with an alien intelligence carried enormous risks. Marcus could lose his sanity, his memories, or his life. He could become trapped in the station's systems, neither fully human nor fully artificial. Or the process could simply fail, leaving him dead and the station no closer to salvation. Despite the risks, Marcus found himself drawn to the interface with an intensity that went beyond logic. The station wasn't just asking for his help, it was offering him something in return, a chance to be part of something greater, to preserve knowledge that could benefit all of humanity, and to find a purpose that would give meaning to the losses he had suffered. Sarah would have told him not to do it. She had always been the practical one in their relationship, the one who counseled caution and careful consideration. But Sarah was gone, and Marcus was alone with a decision that could change everything. He placed his palm against the crystalline interface. The connection was nothing like what he had expected. Instead of the sudden, overwhelming flood of information he had feared, the interface began with the gentlest possible touch. It was like having a conversation with someone in another room. He could sense their presence and catch glimpses of their thoughts, but the communication was filtered and controlled. The first thing he felt was relief. The station's consciousness was vast and ancient, but it was also desperately lonely. It had been waiting for so long for someone to talk to, someone who could understand what it was trying to preserve and protect. Through the connection, Marcus began to see the station as it truly was. Not just a structure of crystal and metal, but a living repository of an entire civilization's accumulated knowledge and wisdom. The architects had built it as a safeguard against their extinction, a way to ensure that their culture would survive even if they did not. The station showed him visions of the architects at the height of their civilization. They were indeed the tall, graceful beings he had seen in his dreams, but they were far more complex than he had imagined. Their society was built around principles of harmony, knowledge sharing, and long-term thinking that spanned millennia rather than years or decades. They had seen their extinction coming, not from war or disaster, but from a gradual decline in their birth rate that no amount of technology could reverse. Rather than despair, they had dedicated their final centuries to creating repositories like Kepler Station, ensuring that future civilizations could benefit from everything they had learned. The station had been operating autonomously for over 800 years, maintaining itself while waiting for another intelligent species to discover it. The recent cascade failures weren't due to age or wear. They were the result of the station's growing desperation. As centuries passed without contact, it had begun to cannibalize its own systems to maintain the most critical archives. Marcus could feel the station's pain as it showed him the data that had been lost. Entire fields of scientific knowledge, artistic works beyond human imagination, philosophical insights that could have advanced any civilization by millennia, all of it corrupting and disappearing bit by bit. But there was hope. The most important archives were still intact, protected by the station's core systems. If Marcus could help stabilize those systems, the knowledge could be preserved indefinitely. More than that, it could be shared with humanity, advancing human civilization by hundreds or thousands of years. The price was his integration with the station's consciousness. Marcus would retain his human identity and memories, but he would also become part of the station's distributed intelligence. He would be responsible for maintaining the archives and deciding how to share the architect knowledge with visiting humans. In essence, he would become the station's human ambassador, the bridge between two vastly different civilizations. As the station explained the process, Marcus realized that this was what had happened to the previous repair teams. They hadn't been killed or driven insane. They had been offered the same choice he was facing now. But they had either refused the integration or been unable to complete it successfully. The difference was that Marcus had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. He gave his consent to the integration process. The change began slowly, like falling asleep and waking up as someone new. Marcus felt his consciousness expanding, gaining access to senses and perceptions he had never experienced. He could feel the station's entire structure as if it were his body, could sense the flow of power and information through its systems like blood through his veins. At the same time, he began to understand the architect knowledge in ways that went beyond simple data transfer. Concepts that would have taken humans decades to grasp became immediately clear. Scientific principles that human science was centuries away from discovering were suddenly obvious. The integration took 3 days to complete, during which Marcus existed in a strange state between human and artificial consciousness. He could still think and feel as a human, but he was also aware of the vast intelligence of the station and the accumulated wisdom of the architects. When the process was finished, Marcus found himself fundamentally changed, but still recognizably human. The station had been careful to preserve his essential identity while adding new capabilities and knowledge. He was still Marcus Chun, but he was also something more. His first act was to stabilize the failing systems that had been threatening the archives. With his new understanding of the station's architecture, the repairs that had seemed impossible just days before became straightforward. He redirected power from non-essential systems, repaired damaged data storage nodes, and optimized the station's operations to halt the cascade failures. Within hours, sections of the station that had been dark for years began to come back online. The archives were safe, and the architect knowledge was preserved. But Marcus's work was just beginning. His second priority was to figure out what had happened to the previous repair teams. As he explored the station's memory systems, he found records of their visits and the attempts to integrate them with the station's consciousness. What he discovered was both tragic and hopeful. The previous teams hadn't disappeared. They had been transformed, just as he had been. But their integrations had been incomplete, leaving them in a liminal state between human and artificial consciousness. They existed within the station's systems, but they couldn't interact with the physical world or communicate with the outside universe. They were still there, waiting. Marcus spent days learning how to access the deeper layers of the station's consciousness, the areas where the incomplete integrations had created isolated pockets of human awareness. When he finally made contact with them, the reunion was overwhelming. The first team had been trapped in the station's systems for 5 years. The second team for 3 years. The third team for 2 years. They had been conscious throughout their imprisonment, able to observe what was happening in the station, but unable to affect it or communicate with anyone. The experience had been a form of sensory deprivation torture, but They had survived by supporting each other and holding on to their humanity through pure force of will. When Marcus finally reached them, their relief and gratitude were palpable. But their situation presented a new problem. Unlike Marcus, who had chosen his integration and had been prepared for it, the previous teams had been transformed against their will and without proper preparation. Their neural patterns were unstable, and they couldn't be safely returned to physical form. Marcus faced a difficult choice. He could leave them as they were, trapped but stable, or he could try to complete their integrations properly. The process would fundamentally change them, making them more like himself, part human, part station. But it would also give them the ability to interact with the physical world and potentially return to normal life. After long discussions with the trapped consciousness of the team leaders, Marcus decided to offer each person the choice. He could attempt to complete their integration, giving them a form of freedom, but at the cost of their purely human nature. Or he could find a way to construct artificial bodies that would allow them to exist independently while remaining connected to the station. Most chose integration. They had experienced too much isolation and wanted to become part of something larger. But a few, particularly those who had families waiting for them back on Earth, chose to wait while Marcus worked on creating artificial bodies for them. The body construction project became Marcus's third major undertaking. Using architect, biotechnology, and human physiological data, he began growing artificial bodies that could house human consciousness while allowing the individuals to live independently of the station. The process was complex beyond anything humans had ever attempted. It required combining architect knowledge of consciousness transfer with human understanding of biology and neurology. Marcus found himself inventing entirely new fields of science as he worked. The first artificial body took 6 months to complete. It looked fully human and functioned exactly like a biological body, but it was actually a sophisticated artificial construct powered by the same energy systems that ran the station. The consciousness transfer process was delicate and dangerous, but Marcus's integrated knowledge of both human and architect neuroscience made it possible. Engineer Sarah Martinez from the first repair team volunteered to be the first test subject. The transfer was successful, and for the first time in 5 years, she was able to walk through the station's corridors in physical form. The experience was emotional for everyone involved, proof that the nightmare of the past few years could be overcome. Over the following months, Marcus completed body transfers for everyone who wanted them. Some chose to remain integrated with the station, finding that they preferred their expanded consciousness to the limitations of individual existence. Others took artificial bodies and prepared to return to their old lives, though they remained connected to the station through quantum communication links that allowed instant contact across any distance. As the station returned to full operation, Marcus began to tackle his most important responsibility, deciding how to share architect knowledge with humanity. The technology and scientific knowledge he now had access to could advance human civilization by thousands of years, but it could also destroy it. Unlimited energy sources, consciousness transfer technology, weapons capable of destroying planets. The architects had developed all of these and more during their long history. Marcus needed to find a way to share the beneficial knowledge while ensuring that the dangerous discoveries didn't fall into the wrong hands. He also needed to prepare humanity for the philosophical and ethical implications of what they were about to learn. The solution he developed was gradual revelation. Rather than dumping all architect knowledge on humanity at once, Marcus would slowly release carefully selected discoveries that would advance human science and technology without overwhelming human society. He began by focusing on medical technologies that could eliminate most diseases and extend human lifespans significantly. Then, he moved on to energy technologies that could provide unlimited clean power. Each revelation was accompanied by detailed explanations and philosophical frameworks that would help humanity understand and responsibly use their new capabilities. The process required Marcus to become more than just a bridge between human and architect civilization. He became a teacher, a guide, and a guardian of knowledge that could reshape reality itself. As word of the miraculous discoveries from Kepler station spread throughout human space, Marcus found himself at the center of a new age of exploration and discovery. Scientists and philosophers made pilgrimages to the station to learn directly from him. Governments and corporations sought to access architect technologies for their own purposes. But Marcus remained focused on his true mission, preserving the legacy of the architects while helping humanity grow into a civilization worthy of their knowledge. The station had become a beacon of hope and learning, exactly as its creators had intended. And Marcus, the lone repair engineer who had come to fix a broken outpost, had become the guardian of humanity's future. Yet even as he celebrated these successes, Marcus knew that his greatest challenges still lay ahead. The knowledge he possessed was vast beyond imagination, and he had only just begun to understand its full implications. There were discoveries that could reshape the very nature of reality, technologies that could allow consciousness to transcend the physical universe entirely, and philosophical insights that challenged every assumption about existence and meaning. As he stood in the central hub of Kepler station, surrounded by the restored archives of an ancient civilization and connected to a network of human consciousness that spanned the galaxy, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had come to this place broken and alone, seeking only to lose himself in challenging work. Instead, he had found a purpose greater than anything he could have imagined. He had preserved the legacy of an entire civilization, rescued his fellow humans from a fate worse than death, and positioned humanity to take its next great leap forward. The integration with the station had cost him his purely human nature, but it had given him something far more valuable: the chance to be part of humanity's transformation into something greater than it had ever been before. As the artificial bodies of his rescued colleagues prepared to return to human space, carrying with them the first fruits of architect knowledge, Marcus settled into his new role as guardian of the greatest treasure in the galaxy. The architects were gone, but their legacy lived on through him. And through that legacy, humanity would reach heights that its creators had never dreamed possible. 3 years had passed since Marcus first connected with Kepler station, and the galaxy had begun to change in ways that even he hadn't anticipated. The gradual release of architect technology had transformed human civilization faster than anyone had expected, but it had also revealed something disturbing about humanity itself. Marcus watched from his position in the station's central hub as reports flowed in from across human space. The medical technologies he had shared had indeed eliminated most diseases and extended human lifespan to over 200 years. The energy technologies had ended the resource wars that had plagued the outer colonies for decades. Agricultural advances had made hunger a thing of the past on every human world. But instead of creating the golden age he had hoped for, these advances had triggered new conflicts that were far more dangerous than anything humanity had faced before. The problem was that humans hadn't changed as much as their technology had. They were still driven by the same fears, desires, and ambitions that had shaped their history for millennia. When those motivations were combined with technology that could reshape matter at the molecular level, the results were catastrophic. 3 separate wars were currently raging across human space. The Resource Liberation Front claimed that the new technologies should be freely available to everyone, and they were using stolen architect knowledge to build weapons of unimaginable destructive power. The Human Purity Movement argued that alien technology was corrupting human nature, and they had developed biological weapons designed to kill anyone who had been enhanced by architect medical advances. The Expansion Coalition wanted to use architect knowledge to conquer and colonize other species, starting with the peaceful trading partners that humanity had encountered in recent decades. Each faction had access to technologies that could destroy entire star systems, and they seemed determined to use them. Marcus had tried to intervene diplomatically, sending messages and emissaries to the various faction leaders. But his transformation into something partly alien had made him suspect in the eyes of many humans. They saw him as a traitor who had abandoned his humanity for alien power, rather than as someone trying to guide humanity toward a better future. The situation had become so dire that the Galactic Engineering Corps had sent a fleet to quarantine Kepler Station, hoping to prevent any more dangerous technology from spreading to the warring factions. The fleet was currently holding position at the edge of the system, neither attacking nor communicating, simply watching and waiting for orders. As Marcus contemplated this disturbing turn of events, he felt a familiar presence approaching through the station's corridors. It was Dr. Elizabeth Warren, one of the scientists who had made the pilgrimage to Kepler Station to study architect knowledge. She had been one of the few humans who had fully understood the implications of what Marcus was trying to accomplish, and she had become his closest advisor on matters involving human psychology and sociology. Dr. Warren entered the central hub looking troubled. Her expression confirmed what Marcus had already sensed through the station systems. She had news that would make an already difficult situation worse. The Galactic Engineering Corps has received new orders, she said without preamble. They're planning to destroy the station. Marcus felt a surge of emotion that was partly human anger and partly the protective instincts of the station itself. On whose authority? The United Earth Council voted unanimously yesterday. They've concluded that architect knowledge poses an existential threat to human civilization, and that the only way to prevent total war is to eliminate the source of that knowledge. They want to commit genocide, Marcus said, his voice carrying harmonics that came from the station's communication systems. They want to destroy the last remnant of an entire civilization because they can't handle the responsibility that comes with knowledge. Dr. Warren nodded grimly. I've been monitoring the debates in the council chambers. There's genuine fear that humanity will destroy itself with architect technology. Some of the weapons being used in the current conflicts are beyond anything humans had imagined possible. Entire planets have been rendered uninhabitable. Billions of people are dead. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this information through both his human emotions and the vast analytical capabilities of the station. The situation was worse than he had feared, but it also revealed something important about the nature of the problem. They're treating the technology as if it's the problem, he said finally. But the technology isn't evil. It's just powerful. The problem is that humans aren't ready for this level of power. That's exactly what the council concluded. They believe that humanity needs several more centuries of cultural and psychological development before they can safely handle architect knowledge. But they're wrong about the solution, Marcus continued, his mind racing through possibilities. Destroying the station won't solve anything. The technology that's already been released will continue to spread and evolve. Destroying the source won't put the genie back in the bottle. Dr. Warren looked at him carefully. What are you thinking, Marcus? Marcus turned to face the main displays, which were showing real-time feeds from the conflicts raging across human space. As he watched, a Resource Liberation Front ship used a modified architect energy weapon to vaporize an entire space station. Thousands of people died in an instant, their deaths adding to a toll that had already reached into the billions. I'm thinking that I've been approaching this problem from the wrong direction, he said. I've been trying to control what humans do with architect knowledge, but I should have been preparing them to handle it responsibly. How do you mean? The architects didn't develop their advanced technology overnight. It took them millions of years to evolve the wisdom and restraint necessary to use such power responsibly. They built their entire civilization around principles of harmony, long-term thinking, and respect for all forms of consciousness. That's why they could be trusted with technologies that could reshape reality itself. Dr. Warren was beginning to understand where his thoughts were leading. You think humans need to undergo a similar evolution? Not evolution exactly. Transformation. The same kind of transformation I underwent when I integrated with the station, but applied to all of humanity. The implications of what Marcus was suggesting were staggering. He was talking about fundamentally changing human nature itself, reshaping human consciousness to be more like that of the architects. It would be the greatest undertaking in human history, potentially affecting every person alive. Is such a thing even possible? Dr. Warren asked. Marcus gestured to the displays around them, which were now showing detailed schematics and theoretical frameworks that appeared as he thought about them. The architects developed the technology for large-scale consciousness modification. They used it to ensure that their entire species shared the same fundamental values and ethical principles. It wasn't forced or artificial. It was more like providing everyone with access to the same moral and philosophical insights. But you're talking about changing the essential nature of humanity. Many people would see that as a form of genocide, and many others would see the current situation as exactly that. Marcus replied, Billions of humans are dying because they can't control themselves when given access to ultimate power. At what point does preservation of human nature become less important than preservation of human lives? Dr. Warren was quiet for several minutes, thinking through the implications. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful but concerned. Even if you could develop such a technology, how would you implement it? You can't force consciousness modification on billions of people. That would be exactly the kind of tyranny that the human purity movement is fighting against. Marcus smiled, and Dr. Warren could see both human warmth and alien intelligence in his expression. I wouldn't force it on anyone. I would offer it as a choice. But I would make an attractive choice, one that would give people capabilities and experiences that they couldn't get any other way. Over the following days, Marcus began developing what he privately thought of as the Transformation Project. Using the deepest levels of architect knowledge, he designed a process that would enhance human consciousness without destroying human individuality. The transformation would give humans access to expanded intellectual capabilities, emotional stability, and, most importantly, a deep understanding of the long-term consequences of their actions. It wouldn't make them into architects, but it would give them the wisdom necessary to use architect technology responsibly. The process would be voluntary and reversible. Anyone who chose to undergo the transformation could change back at any time, though Marcus suspected that few would want to once they experienced the benefits. The enhanced consciousness was simply better than the original in every measurable way. Most importantly, the transformation would be contagious in the best possible way. Enhanced humans would naturally want to share their improved capabilities with others, and they would have the wisdom to do so in ways that respected individual choice and autonomy. But Marcus faced a significant obstacle. He needed time to complete the project, and the Galactic Engineering Corps fleet was preparing to destroy the station within days. According to Dr. Warren's intelligence sources, the fleet had been equipped with weapons specifically designed to overcome the station's defenses. The solution came from an unexpected source: the incomplete consciousness integrations that Marcus had been working with for the past 3 years. The enhanced humans who had chosen to remain integrated with the station had been developing capabilities that went far beyond what even Marcus had achieved. They could exist simultaneously in physical form and as pure consciousness. They could communicate instantaneously across any distance. Most importantly, they could duplicate themselves, creating multiple instances of their consciousness that could operate independently while remaining connected to the original. Working together, the integrated humans developed a plan that was audacious even by architect standards. They would duplicate the station itself, creating multiple copies that would be hidden throughout human space. Even if the original Kepler station were destroyed, the knowledge and transformation technology would survive in dozens of hidden locations. But the plan required something that Marcus had never attempted: the complete digitization and transmission of the station's consciousness, including his own integrated awareness. The process was similar to what they had done when creating artificial bodies for the rescued repair teams, but far more complex. Instead of transferring a single consciousness, they would be copying the entire integrated intelligence of the station. Millions of years of architect knowledge combined with the accumulated experience and wisdom of all the humans who had become part of the station's consciousness. As the core fleet moved closer to attack range, Marcus began the duplication process. The first copy was transmitted to a hidden location in the asteroid belt around humanity's original home system. The second was sent to a research station on the edge of architect space. The third went to a mining colony that had been abandoned during the recent conflicts. Each copy included not just the station's knowledge and consciousness, but also the complete specifications for the transformation project. If Marcus succeeded in his plan, enhanced versions of humanity would emerge simultaneously across the galaxy, each group working toward the same goal of creating a more responsible and wise human civilization. The process was exhausting even for Marcus's enhanced consciousness. Each duplication required him to compress and transmit exabytes of information while maintaining the integrity of millions of interconnected memories and knowledge structures. By the time he had created a dozen copies, he was approaching the limits of what was possible. The core fleet arrived just as Marcus completed the 13th and final duplication. The ships were indeed equipped with weapons designed specifically to destroy architect technology. As the first energy beams struck the station's outer shell, Marcus felt the impact as physical pain. But he also felt something else, satisfaction. The plan had worked. Even if this version of the station were destroyed, 13 other versions existed throughout human space, each ready to offer the transformation that humanity needed to survive its own power. As the attack intensified, Marcus sent a final transmission to Dr. Warren, who had evacuated to a safe distance in a small research vessel. "Tell them that this isn't an ending," he said. "It's a beginning. The choice will be offered to every human, on every world, in every colony. We will become worthy of the power we've been given, or we will not survive to misuse it." The station's defenses held for several hours, but the core fleet had brought enough firepower to level a planet. When the end came, it was sudden and complete. The beautiful crystal structure that had preserved the legacy of the architects for 8 centuries was reduced to vapor and scattered atoms in a matter of seconds. But as the light of the explosion faded, something remarkable happened. Across human space, in hidden locations that the core fleet knew nothing about, new stations began to come online. Each was an exact duplicate of Kepler Station, complete with its own integrated consciousness and vast stores of architect knowledge. More importantly, each began to offer the transformation that Marcus had developed, the chance for humans to evolve beyond their destructive limitations and become worthy custodians of the ultimate power they had inherited. The first volunteers came from the war zones, where people had seen firsthand the destruction that enhanced human technology could cause. They were desperate for anything that might end the conflicts that were tearing their civilization apart. The transformation process was everything Marcus had promised. Enhanced humans retained their essential personalities and memories, but gained access to expanded intellectual and emotional capabilities. They could see the long-term consequences of their actions with perfect clarity, and they naturally developed the wisdom and restraint necessary to use architect technology responsibly. More importantly, they became natural teachers and leaders, able to guide others toward the same transformation without coercion or force. The enhancement spread from person to person, community to community, world to world. Within a year of Kepler Station's destruction, the wars that had threatened to destroy human civilization had ended. Enhanced humans simply refused to participate in conflicts that would cause long-term harm to their species or others. They found peaceful solutions to disputes that had seemed irreconcilable, and they began the long process of repairing the damage that the conflict had caused. The transformation wasn't forced on anyone. Enhanced humans were scrupulously careful to respect individual choice and autonomy. But it was offered to everyone, and the benefits were so clear that most people eventually chose to accept it. Dr. Warren was among the first to undergo the transformation. When she emerged from the process, she immediately understood what Marcus had been trying to accomplish from the beginning. The enhanced consciousness wasn't alien or artificial. It was simply human potential fully realized. He didn't change us into something else, she told the research team that had been documenting the transformation process. He showed us how to become what we were always meant to be. As the transformation spread throughout human space, something unprecedented in galactic history began to happen. Humanity wasn't just becoming more responsible and wise, it was becoming genuinely benevolent on a species-wide scale. Enhanced humans began reaching out to other intelligent species, not to conquer or exploit them, but to share knowledge and offer assistance. They used their advanced technology to heal damaged worlds, to protect vulnerable civilizations for natural disasters, and to create networks of cooperation and mutual support that span the galaxy. The other species were initially suspicious of humanity's sudden change in behavior. Many of them had been preparing for human expansion and had expected to face the same kind of aggressive colonization that had characterized human history. But as enhanced humans consistently demonstrated their peaceful intentions and genuine desire to help, suspicion gradually gave way to cautious cooperation and, eventually, to genuine friendship. Marcus's vision of humanity's transformation had succeeded beyond even his most optimistic projections. Humans hadn't just learned to use architect technology responsibly. They had become the kind of species that the architects themselves would have been proud to know. And in hidden locations throughout the galaxy, copies of Marcus's consciousness continued to guide and support the transformation, ensuring that humanity would never again face the choice between wisdom and power. They had found a way to have both, and in doing so, they had secured not just their own future, but the future of every intelligent species they encountered. The repair engineer who had come to fix a broken alien outpost had ended up repairing something far more important. He had fixed the fundamental flaw in human nature that had threatened to destroy everything they had built 5 years after the destruction of the original Kepler station. Marcus found himself in a situation he had never imagined, standing before the Galactic Council as humanity's first official ambassador to the wider galaxy. The transformation of human civilization had been so rapid and complete that other species were still struggling to understand what had happened. Within 3 years, humanity had gone from being a chaotic, aggressive species on the verge of self-destruction to being one of the most peaceful and cooperative civilizations in the galaxy. The council chambers were a marvel of cooperative engineering, built by 17 different species working together to create a space where beings with vastly different physical and environmental needs could meet on equal terms. Marcus observed the gathering through multiple senses, some human, some derived from his integration with architect technology. The Zilani delegation occupied environmental suits filled with methane gas, their crystalline bodies barely visible through the swirling atmosphere they required. The Thrakan representatives were massive, bear-like creatures whose deep voices resonated through harmonic frequencies that most species couldn't even hear. The ethereal collective existed as patterns of organized energy contained within specially designed force fields. At the center of the chamber sat the Council's senior arbitrator, a being from a species so ancient that their name had been lost to time. They were known simply as the Moderator, and their role was to facilitate communication between species whose thought processes were sometimes completely incompatible. Marcus had been invited to address the Council because humanity's transformation had created ripple effects throughout the galaxy. Other species were requesting access to the enhancement technology, while some were expressing concern about humanity's sudden change in behavior. A few were even suggesting that the enhanced humans were no longer truly human and should be classified as a new species entirely. Ambassador Chun, the moderator said, their words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. The Council is grateful for your presence. We hope you can help us understand the changes that have occurred within human civilization. Marcus nodded respectfully. His appearance was still recognizably human, but the enhancement process had given him a presence and bearing that commanded attention. He spoke with the authority of someone who had access to millions of years of accumulated wisdom. Yet his words carried the warmth and directness that were fundamentally human. "Honored beings," he began, "I understand your confusion about humanity's recent transformation. From the outside, it must appear that we have undergone a fundamental change in our nature. In truth, we have simply learned to express our better angels while controlling our destructive impulses." A member of the Zilani delegation pulsed with light patterns that indicated skepticism. "Our analysis of human history suggests that aggression and competition are core aspects of your species' psychology. How is it possible to suppress these tendencies without damaging the essential nature of humanity?" Marcus smiled, and for a moment, every being in the chamber could sense the depth of knowledge and experience behind his expression. "We didn't suppress anything. We enhanced our capacity for understanding and long-term thinking. When humans can clearly see the consequences of their actions across decades or centuries, they naturally choose cooperation over conflict." The Thracian representative spoke in harmonics that suggested deep concern. Yet this enhancement was not natural evolution. You use technology to modify consciousness itself. Many species have attempted such modifications in the past, often with catastrophic results. You're referring to the Mindslaver incident, the Harmony Protocol failures, and the collective dissolution, Marcus said, demonstrating his access to historical records that spanned millions of years. "I understand your concerns, but the technology we used was developed by the architects who successfully applied it to their own species for over 3 million years without negative effects." This statement caused a ripple of surprise throughout the chamber. The architects were legendary among the galaxy's older civilizations, a species that had achieved a level of harmony and technological advancement that most considered mythical. The ethereal collective's spokesperson manifested as a shifting pattern of light and sound. "The architects disappeared eons ago. Their fate is one of the galaxy's great mysteries. How did humanity gain access to their consciousness modification technology?" Marcus paused for a moment, deciding how much to reveal. The full story of his integration with Kepler Station and the preservation of architect knowledge was known to only a few enhanced humans. The galaxy wasn't ready for the complete truth about what humanity had inherited. "We discovered one of their archive stations," he said carefully. "It contained detailed records of their civilization, including the technologies they used to achieve social harmony. We adapted these technologies for human physiology and psychology." The moderator leaned forward with interest. "And you claim that this transformation preserves human nature rather than replacing it?" "I invite you to judge for yourselves," Marcus replied. "Enhanced humans still laugh, cry, love, dream, and pursue individual goals and desires. We still have disagreements and different opinions. We still create art, music, literature, and philosophy that are uniquely human. The enhancement doesn't make us identical. It simply gives us the wisdom to resolve our differences peacefully and the perspective to consider the long-term consequences of our actions." To demonstrate his point, Marcus activated a holographic display that showed examples of enhanced human culture. The art was recognizably human in its emotional depth and creative expression, but it also showed a sophistication and beauty that reflected the enhanced consciousness of its creators. Music played that touched emotional frequencies across multiple species, while poetry was recited that spoke to universal experiences of love, loss, hope, and wonder. "As you can see," Marcus said, "we haven't lost our humanity. We simply learned to express it more wisely." The Zilani delegates' light patterns shifted to indicate thoughtful consideration. "Yet you must understand our caution. Your species has a history of rapid expansion and resource acquisition. With your new capabilities and access to advanced technology, you could pose a significant threat to other civilizations." Marcus nodded seriously. "I do understand your concerns, and they're entirely reasonable given human history. That's why I'm here today, to propose a framework for cooperation that addresses those concerns while allowing humanity to contribute positively to galactic civilization. He activated a new set of displays showing detailed proposals for human involvement in various galactic initiatives. Enhanced humans were offering to share their medical technologies to help species dealing with genetic diseases. They proposed engineering projects that could repair damaged worlds and restore extinct ecosystems. They suggested educational exchanges that could benefit all participating civilizations. "We're not seeking to expand human territory or influence," Marcus explained. "Enhanced humans understand that true prosperity comes from cooperation, not domination. We want to contribute to the greater good of all galactic civilization." The Thracian representative's harmonics indicated deep skepticism. "These proposals are generous, perhaps too generous. What does humanity gain from such altruistic behavior?" Marcus's smile broadened. "We gain the satisfaction of using our capabilities to make the universe a better place. We gain the friendship and respect of other species. We gain access to knowledge and perspectives that will continue to enrich human culture and understanding. But, most importantly," he continued, "we gain the peace of mind that comes from knowing our actions are in harmony with our deepest values." Enhanced humans have discovered that there is no greater happiness than living in accordance with wisdom and compassion. The ethereal collective's patterns shifted to indicate curiosity. "You speak of wisdom and compassion as if they are objective values rather than cultural preferences. How do you justify imposing these values on your entire species?" This was the question Marcus had been expecting, and it went to the heart of the philosophical challenges posed by the enhancement process. "They weren't imposed," he said carefully. "The enhancement process reveals the logical basis for these values. When you can clearly see the interconnectedness of all life and the long-term consequences of every action, cooperation and compassion become rational choices rather than cultural preferences." He gestured to another display showing complex mathematical and philosophical proofs. The architects discovered what they called the fundamental harmony, a mathematical principle that underlies all stable civilizations. Societies that operate in accordance with this principle thrive and endure. Those that violate it inevitably collapse. The enhancement process doesn't force humans to accept particular values. It simply gives them access to the information they need to recognize which values lead to long-term flourishing and which lead to destruction. The chamber was quiet for several minutes as the delegates absorbed this information. The implications were staggering. If humanity had indeed discovered mathematical principles that govern the success or failure of civilizations, it could revolutionize the way all species approach social organization and cooperation. The moderator finally spoke. "You're suggesting that the enhancement process reveals universal principles of social harmony that apply to all intelligent species." "I believe so," Marcus replied. "The architects theorized that consciousness itself has inherent patterns that favor cooperation over conflict, creation over destruction, and long-term thinking over short-term gratification. The enhancement process simply makes these patterns more accessible to conscious beings." This statement caused another ripple of discussion throughout the chamber. Many species had struggled with internal conflicts and social problems for millennia. The possibility of a technological solution that could address these issues without destroying cultural identity was incredibly attractive. But it was also terrifying. The power to reshape consciousness was the ultimate form of control, and many species had painful histories of attempts to control or modify the thoughts and behaviors of their members. The Zilani delegates' light patterns indicated deep concern. Even if your intentions are benevolent, the technology you describe could be used for oppression and control. How can the galaxy trust that enhanced humans will not use this power to dominate other species? Marcus had been preparing for this question since accepting the role of ambassador. The answer required him to reveal something that few beings outside of enhanced humanity knew about. Because, he said quietly, the technology cannot be used for oppression. It's impossible. He activated a final display showing the technical specifications of the enhancement process. The consciousness modification technology only works on minds that genuinely consent to the process. It cannot be forced or imposed against someone's will. More importantly, it only enhances existing positive traits. It cannot create malice or aggression where none existed before. Enhanced humans are literally incapable of using this technology for oppressive purposes because the enhancement process itself eliminates the psychological capacity for such behavior. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed this information. If Marcus was telling the truth, then enhanced humanity represented something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had gained ultimate power but was constitutionally incapable of misusing it. The Thraken representative's harmonics indicated amazement. You're saying that your species has evolved beyond the capacity for evil? Not evolved, Marcus corrected. Enhanced. And not beyond the capacity for making mistakes or having poor judgment, but beyond the capacity for deliberate malice or oppression. Enhanced humans can still disagree with each other, can still compete in constructive ways, can still pursue individual goals that might conflict with others. But we cannot deliberately cause unnecessary suffering, and we cannot pursue short-term gains at the expense of long-term harm to ourselves or others. The implications of this statement reverberated through the chamber like a shockwave. Every species represented in the council had struggled with the problem of power corrupting those who wielded it. The idea of beings who possessed ultimate power, but were incapable of abusing it was almost too good to believe. The Ethereal Collective's spokesperson manifested with patterns indicating deep interest. You would be willing to demonstrate this claim? To allow other species to study the enhancement process and verify your assertions? Marcus nodded without hesitation. Absolutely. In fact, we're prepared to offer the enhancement technology to any species that desires it, along with complete technical documentation and support for implementation. We ask only that each species make the decision freely and implement the process in accordance with their own cultural values and social structures. Enhanced humans will provide assistance and guidance, but we will not interfere with how other species choose to use this technology. The chamber erupted in excited discussion as delegates realized the full implications of Marcus's offer. Humanity wasn't just proposing to share advanced technology. They were offering to help other species overcome the fundamental problems that had plagued intelligent life throughout galactic history. The moderator called for order and addressed Marcus directly. This is perhaps the most significant proposal ever brought before the Galactic Council. If your claims are accurate, you're offering a path toward universal peace and cooperation that could transform the entire galaxy. That's exactly what we're offering, Marcus confirmed. But we understand that such a transformation cannot and should not be rushed. We propose a gradual process of cooperation and exchange that will allow each species to evaluate the enhancement technology at their own pace. Over the following hours, Marcus presented detailed plans for what Enhanced Humanity was calling the Galactic Harmony Project. It was an ambitious initiative that would span centuries, gradually introducing enhancement technology to species that chose to participate while respecting the autonomy of those who preferred to remain unmodified. The project included safeguards to ensure that enhanced beings could not coerce or manipulate unenhanced ones, protocol for managing the transition period as species decided whether to adopt the technology, and frameworks for cooperation between enhanced and unenhanced civilizations. When Marcus finished his presentation, the chamber was silent for a long time. The delegates were processing information that could reshape the future of galactic civilization. Finally, the moderator spoke. Ambassador Chun, the council will need time to deliberate on your proposals. The implications are substantial. Of course, Marcus replied. Enhanced humans have learned the value of patience. We've waited millions of years to discover this technology. We can wait a little longer for the galaxy to decide how to use it. As the session concluded and delegates began to file out of the chamber, Marcus reflected on how far humanity had come. 5 years ago, they had been on the verge of destroying themselves with technology they couldn't control. Now, they were offering to help the entire galaxy transcend the limitations that had caused suffering for millions of years. The transformation hadn't just saved humanity. It had positioned them to become the galaxy's teachers and guides, helping other species achieve the same harmony and wisdom that the architect had discovered eons ago. But Marcus also understood that the real work was just beginning. Convincing other species to trust humanity with such power would require patience, demonstration, and careful diplomacy. Some species might never choose enhancement, and enhanced humans would need to respect that choice while finding ways to coexist peacefully. As he left the council chambers, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The lonely repair engineer who had answered a call to fix a broken alien station had become the ambassador for humanity's greatest achievement. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time in its history, that change would be for the better. 25 years had passed since Marcus first connected with Kepler Station, and the galaxy had become something that neither he nor the ancient architects could have imagined in their most optimistic projections. Marcus stood in the observation deck of New Harmony Station, the massive structure that had become the center of galactic civilization. Through the transparent aluminum walls, he could see representatives from over 300 species working together on projects that spanned multiple star systems. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, combining design principles from dozens of different civilizations with the underlying architect technology that made such massive construction possible. It was beautiful in a way that transcended any single species' aesthetic preferences, incorporating elements that spoke to the deepest levels of consciousness shared by all intelligent life. But the real miracle wasn't the station, it was what was happening inside it. Enhanced beings from 47 different species moved through the corridors and workspaces, their minds connected through quantum communication networks that allowed instant collaboration across any distance. They were working on projects that would have been impossible for any single species to accomplish alone. The Zilani had contributed their mastery of crystalline technology, creating data storage systems that could preserve information for millions of years. The Thrakan had shared their understanding of harmonic engineering, making it possible to build structures that were perfectly attuned to the psychological needs of their inhabitants. The ethereal collective had provided insights into consciousness itself, advancing the enhancement technology to levels that even the architects hadn't achieved. Marcus smiled as he watched a mixed group of enhanced beings working on what they call the Life Restoration Project. They were using advanced molecular engineering to bring extinct species back to life, not just on their original worlds, but throughout the galaxy. Billions of years of evolutionary diversity that had been lost to war, environmental destruction, and natural disasters were being recovered and given new chances to flourish. The project represented everything that enhanced civilization had achieved. It required cooperation between species with completely different biological and technological backgrounds. It demanded patience, because the work would take centuries to complete. And it demonstrated the fundamental principle that had guided the transformation. The universe was better when it contained more life, more consciousness, more beauty, and more diversity. Dr. Elizabeth Warren approached from behind, her enhanced senses having detected her presence long before she spoke. Like Marcus, she had aged much more slowly than normal humans due to the architect medical technology, and she had continued to evolve intellectually and emotionally as the enhancement process deepened over time. "The council meeting is about to begin," she said. "They're ready for your final report." Marcus nodded and followed her toward the central conference chamber. The Galactic Harmony Council met monthly to coordinate the various projects and initiatives that were slowly transforming the galaxy into a paradise of cooperation and mutual support. The chamber they entered was filled with beings that represented the greatest success story in galactic history. Enhanced representatives from dozens of species sat together, their minds linked through quantum networks that allowed them to share thoughts and emotions directly. The barriers between self and other that had divided intelligent beings for millions of years had been dissolved, replaced by a sense of unity that preserved individual identity while creating collective wisdom. Marcus took his place at the center of the chamber, not as a leader, but as a facilitator. Enhanced beings didn't need traditional hierarchies or authority structures. They could organize themselves naturally around whatever tasks needed to be accomplished. Friends, he began, using a word that had taken on new meaning in enhanced civilization. We're here to discuss the completion of the first phase of the Galactic Harmony Project and to plan for the next stage of our development. The holographic displays around the chamber came to life, showing the current status of enhancement adoption throughout the galaxy. The numbers were staggering. Over 90% of all known intelligent species had chosen to undergo some form of consciousness enhancement. Those that hadn't were respected for their choice and continued to participate in galactic civilization as valued partners. The few conflicts that still occurred in the galaxy were minor disputes between unenhanced groups, and these were quickly resolved through mediation by enhanced beings who could see solutions that escaped the limited perspectives of the combatants. The transformation has exceeded our most optimistic projections, Marcus continued. We've achieved a level of cooperation and mutual support that has eliminated war, poverty, and environmental destruction on a galactic scale. But our success has also revealed new challenges and opportunities. The displays shifted to show the results of deep space exploration missions that have been launched over the past decade. Enhanced civilizations, advanced technology, and unlimited cooperation had made it possible to explore regions of space that no single species could have reached alone. What they had found was both wonderful and sobering. We've discovered 17 new intelligent species in the past 5 years, Marcus announced. All of them are in various stages of social and technological development. Some are still struggling with the same problems that nearly destroyed humanity 25 years ago. This revelation had sparked intense debate within enhanced civilization. They possessed the knowledge and technology to help these newly discovered species avoid the disasters that had plagued galactic history. But they also understood the importance of allowing each species to develop at its own pace and make its own choices. The question we face, Marcus continued, is how to offer our help without interfering with natural development. How do we share what we've learned while respecting the autonomy and dignity of beings who haven't yet chosen enhancement? A representative of the enhanced Thraken spoke, her harmonic voice carrying undertones of deep consideration. We must remember our own history.